Well, to most people, a sword is a weapon of war, but a fine sword can also be a treasured work of art and a symbol of cultural identity.
One of the most prominent experts and collectors of Japanese swords in the United States lives right here in Los Angeles. Tonight, Saul Gonzalez introduces us to the man and reveals some of the secrets of the Japanese sword.
On a gritty industrial street in the shadow of downtown Los Angeles, there's a sanctuary behind whose walls a centuries-old art form endures. It is Iaido, traditional Japanese swordsmanship. In this dojo, or martial arts training academy, students are taught to master the choreography of combat and the way of the sword. The school's founder is the Reverend Kensho Furuya, an ordained Zen minister, martial arts expert, and connoisseur of the Japanese blade.
The great sword, the great masterpiece is really something. When you hold it, you can feel the energy, not just its beauty, and you're not simply impressed by its market value, but there's something to it which is truly amazing. I love it as a beautiful work of art. I love it for its rich cultural tradition. It's beautiful, beautiful, not only the blade itself, but the fittings, the sword guards, all of the lacquer work involved, the way the handles wrap the leather, the silk braid that's used for wrapping the handle. Everything about it is very beautiful.
His passion for the sword has led Furuya to acquire one of the best collections of Japanese swords in the United States. They are one-of-a-kind, centuries-old masterpieces, weapons which are the artistic equivalents of a Rembrandt painting or Verdi opera for aficionados of the sword. Finding these pieces has been a lifelong endeavor for Furuya.
When I was young, my whole paycheck went to pay for the sword. Giving my paycheck away every month for 1 year or 2 years. Sometimes I literally starved just to get one sword, or waited 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or searched for 20, 30 years to find a sword.
Some of the most beautiful swords in Furuya's collection were forged in the bloodiest of times, the turmoil of feudal Japan. It was an age when kingdom fought kingdom, and swords were wielded by some of history's most fierce warriors, the samurai.
It represented his way of life, his mentality, his taste, his mental attitude, and it was also a symbol of his courage and bravery. No one ever touched his sword. In fact, it was a crime even to look at someone's sword or even to touch it. And never left his side. And in fact, in feudal times, they used to say the sword was valued beyond human life.
That union of weapon and warrior has often been portrayed in Japanese cinema, most famously in the classic films of director Akira Kurosawa. In the contemporary world, the sword is used to teach virtues and values. Every parry mastered and thrust perfected is a small step on a journey towards self-enlightenment.
If we don't have the right spirit, even though we have technical skill and strength, the sword won't work for us. It actually will turn against us. So this is a very interesting thing about the sword. It's not just a weapon. It's not just a piece of metal used for cutting. There's something inside the sword, this kind of spirit that was instilled into the sword by its maker and instilled into the sword by its previous owner, which makes it something very special and something very unique.
The soul of a fine sword is, of course, its blade. It's a beautifully pure form of steel, which to the expert's eye can tell a rich tale.
As you begin to study swords, you can look at the temper line, the shape, the length, the width, the color of the metal, the type of forging inside of the metal. We can look at the tang of the blade. We can look at the kisaki of the blade or the tip of the blade, and these all indicate its age, its area of manufacture, its school or tradition, and its maker, and in many cases, the maker when he made it when he was young or when he was middle-aged or when he was older.
Some of the swords in Furuya's collection have grisly stories behind them.
This is one of my swords. It's not my best sword, but it's my favorite sword. And it's a medium-sized sword known as a wakizashi, and it's made by Kazunasuke Kaneshige in the early part of the 1600s. It's also known as the Devil's Butcher Knife. It was owned by a famous samurai. This sword also has a body test, cutting through 3 bodies in 1 stroke.
Centuries after its creation, the strength of a Japanese sword is still impressive. Like his students, however, Kensho Furuya is fascinated by the sword for what it can teach, not destroy.
Although I'm just a human being, I want to model myself after the sword, always straight, always true, very decisive, something that doesn't have an outer obvious strength that we look for today, but something that has an inner strength, which is hard to see unless you really know it and really can appreciate it.
Is fascinated by the sword for what it can teach, not destroy.
Although I'm just a human being, I want to model myself after the sword, always straight, always true, very decisive, something that doesn't have an outer obvious strength that we look for today, but something that has an inner strength, which is hard to see unless you really know it and really can appreciate it.